Uh,
There we go.
okay. Now I need to share. Okay. So, welcome everybody. Tonight's Wisdom of the Pathwork exploration will look at kind of one of the most important lectures in, I think, a lot of what the guide does, especially in sort of really understanding sort of how the self-created patterns that we get into are maintained and how they're kind of in the unconscious, and so they just keep recycling, and yet it kind of helps us see like how we are creating certain situations in a useful way, I think, and helps us understand some of what he means when he talks about self-responsibility. So it's one of the earlier lectures on sort of the psychological aspects of the spiritual path and how they kind of intertwine as well. So this was delivered November 11th, 1960. And the title is The Compulsion to Recreate and Overcome Childhood Hurts. It says, "Greetings, my dearest friends. God bless all of you. May the divine blessings extend to every one of you and help you assimilate the words I speak tonight so that this will be a fruitful evening for you. Our last discussion was about the fear of loving. The subject of love was presented at great length and from various angles in past sessions. You will remember that I frequently mention how the child desires to be loved exclusively and without limits. In other words, the child's desire to be loved is unrealistic. Yet it is also true that the child would be very satisfied with real, mature love. And in fact, if it were given, the unrealistic demand for exclusive love would be diminished considerably. However, the capacity for tendering genuine, mature love is rare. Since children so seldom receive sufficient mature love and warmth, they continue to hunger for it throughout life, unless this lack and hurt is recognized and properly dealt with. If not as adults, they will go through life unconsciously crying out for what they missed in childhood, and this will make them incapable of loving maturely themselves. So you can see how this condition continues from generation to generation. So let me pause there for a second and just see any comments or questions on that. Does it make sense? Can you find in your own self sort of in some part of your conscious, your desire for, like total love? How does he describe it? So that the child desires to be loved exclusively and without limits, right? Can you have you suppressed that part of you so deeply that it's not like, because it wasn't allowed, right? So we had to all put caps on it, but then that's also why we're always addicted and don't feel like we have enough and want more. And a lot of times in relationships, it comes up, and within work with our employers or our bosses or like that we're sort of projecting and then trying to get this love that we may have felt like we didn't get somehow in childhood.
I can also get in touch with the memory of my childhood, longing for that when I was a child.
Yeah.
And this sentence here, it says, however, the capacity for tendering genuine, mature love is rare, which brings up a phrase that I've heard and used before, is we are wounded children being raised by wounded children.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. And, in some ways, from the spiritual level of looking at it, I think the guide is suggesting that, like we are all involved also from the higher self level in, trying to, bring those children back home, right, in a sense, or, help them, recognize, their own capacity for loving, in spite of the imperfect love that we might have received and all of those kinds of things. And sort of in that way, somehow evolving, moving forward, sort of this generational, uh, dynamic that we inherit. And so kind of on the soul level, like there's a great love that continues to bring us back in to try to heal each other, to try to um, go back into the wound and then transform that. And that, can also heal the ancestry, is kind of what I understand from a shamanic perspective. And often that the ancestors, after they die, like at that, in the human form, they're still, with this, their own, unmet needs and, you know, defense and pain around all of that. But after we die, I think, I don't know that there's instant enlightenment, right? But we're no longer quite as lost and confused and, inside of just the unconscious of the physical, the density of the physical plane and stuff like that. So my my suspicion is that we have a little wider perspective, right? And then in that sense we can, also participate, maybe in helping. I mean, many cultures talk about how the ancestors, can walk with us, can, like they may have hurt us or wounded us in life, but on the other side, they can sometimes help us. And sometimes, they're not evolved enough and, it's enough that they gave us life or whatever. But, I think a lot of times there's like soul bands and family bands in some way that, keep trying to heal these old wounds. And often they're karmic and interconnected in between each other as well. So just to kind of span out to like a spiritual level of this, but here's talking mostly in this lecture about, this lifetime, and, says that we don't even really need to know about all our past lives and stuff to do this deep work around this, especially. So.
Yeah, but it requires that it requires a willingness, a humility, an understanding of what you really are missing, what you really need and want. Someone can't come up to you and say, look, you're acting this way because of all of this, and this. And let me show you what's really the problem. If you're not already ready to understand it, it's just not going to work. You can't force it on someone who's not ready to hear it.
Correct. I think most people, though, I find, begin to recognize as they go through adulthood to some degree, right? That it feels like, sort of somehow the pattern starts dawning in consciousness, like this, this is a different person, but it feels like the same relationship as it was the last one, or whatever. And I think that helps people begin and can have a doorway into understanding this. And this is, as he describes it, is actually, also in modern psychology. I think Freud actually wrote about this, called it repetition compulsion. But there is a way that I think the guide adds an element to it that is useful to understand, and also talks about like the healing of it, like so, and that's kind of the main thing, that even when we do get this and even recognize it, it's like oftentimes it's like a little death that we have to go through, and the whole structure of everything, around it was created to avoid that death, right? And so the lecture gets into this, but I think it's a fascinating way of understanding, kind of how we trap ourselves a little bit, and that, again, the remedy does lie in us, and with our, ability and willingness to just face, and like you said, in humility, our the feelings that we have, and if we can't hold ourselves, and in doing that, um, then it's more difficult. We're more identified with the critic, the ISI, or whatever, and we can't be, the love that we're seeking from outside of ourselves. Then it makes it, more problematic. But there's many little ways that you can, like, I think what you're saying, Frank, mostly is that you can't just get this intellectually. You have to get it in your experience and your, deep understanding with your feelings and all of that. So,
it's almost like, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Skylar.
Almost like that person has to be meeting you more on emotional level, because it's kind of like they have to be in a certain emotional state to get the message. And because we're driven by emotions, I don't know, it is sort of, interpersonal relationships are very complex, but it's definitely, yeah, like healing the inner child more, maybe focusing on our own triggers around the person, and working on that. At least that's my focus in relationships at the moment, focusing on what,
Right.
Yeah, and healing that.
And this, I think this will be a good key for you in that, because that's basically what he's talking about too. But he gives us a very beautiful, precise key in it that I find is, and no matter how long I've been doing this work, like if I'm caught in something, if I, start working at, I will often, as many times as I've seen it, go back and see, oh, here I am in the recreation again, to some degree, right? So yeah, hi, welcome, Vic. How are you doing? So we just started reading, so I'll just continue. We were discussing a little, like his saying about how if we had, if there was genuine, mature love, we wouldn't end up sort of with this hunger inside that is kind of what drives the process where we don't grow up, but we continue to try to, have our dependency needs met from outside of us, right? By somebody, anybody, and then basically saying unconsciously we select people very similar to the people that wounded us in the first place and couldn't give us the kind of love we needed. So he says, since children so seldom receive sufficient mature love and warmth, they continue to hunger for it throughout life, unless this lack and hurt is recognized and properly dealt with. Now, again, properly, it means, like in a sense that we have to recognize, and we have to, work with that child. We have to hold that child. We have to re-educate that child. We have to supply what that child did not get from ourselves initially. And then it also, can come to us from others. But if we don't, give it to ourselves, then, we can't. And so first of all, we kind of have to come into a relationship with ourselves that is different than kind of our habitual one and automatic one, which is usually coming from the critic and the judge, and, is trying to, make the inner child and its problems, the problem, and trying to correct it, or, be mad at it because it's not getting it right, or frustrated with it, those kinds of things, right? And so, this particular negative dynamic that we're usually in with ourselves is like what sort of blocks the healing movement for this piece. But he's taking us pretty directly there. So he talks about, if not, when we don't, recognize and deal with this hurt as adults, we go through life unconsciously crying out for what we missed in childhood. And then this makes us, we're so needy, like we're incapable of giving. We're like like we have to take in, we have to receive. And so then we're not really able to give love. And that's what he says is the real adult need, right? It's the child's need to receive love. And when you didn't get that as a child, it was a tragedy. And we need to hold the grief and move through the loss of that in a healthy way, which is what you weren't able to do. So he says the remedy cannot be found by wishing that things were different, that people would learn to practice mature love. The remedy lies solely in you. True, if you had received such love from your parents, you would be without this problem of which you are not really and fully aware. But this lack of receiving mature love need trouble neither you nor your life. If you become aware of it, see it, and rearrange your former unconscious wishes, regrets, thoughts, and concepts by aligning them to the reality of each situation. As a consequence, you will not only become a happier person, but you will also be able to extend mature love to others, to your children, if you have any, or to other people in your environment, so that a benign chain reaction can start. Such a realistic self-correction is very contrary to the present inner behavior, which we'll now consider. So this is kind of, where we're in the negative creation. It says all people, including even those who have started to explore their own unconscious mind and emotions, habitually overlook the strong link between the child's longing and unfulfillment and the adult's present difficulties and problems. So it's like you can almost take any of your issues or problems, like as an adult that you have, and you can apply this lecture to it and get a lot out of it. It doesn't even have to be just relationship problems, but many have some similarity with that. And certainly with relationship problems, it's very useful. So he says that the child's, this link between the child's longing and unfulfillment and the adult present difficulties, because we don't experience personally and we just recognize in theory like how strong this link is. So he says awareness of it is essential. And so again, it's not just the understanding of the concept, but we need to feel it inside of us. There may be isolated exceptional cases where one parent offers a sufficient degree of mature love, even if one parent has it to some measure, very likely the other does not. Since mature love on this earth is only present to a degree, the child will suffer from the shortcomings of even a loving parent. More often, however, both parents are emotionally immature and cannot give the love the child craves, or give it only in insufficient measure. During childhood, this need is rarely conscious. Children have no way of putting their needs into thoughts. They cannot compare what they have with what others have. And this may be different, in this age more where there's so much media and what I think, Frank, you were kind of implying that you remember feeling the lack of this love and being more aware of it. I think I represent more like, like it was kind of the ocean that I lived in, so I couldn't even put my finger on what the problem was, right? But I think either way, it kind of has a slightly different way of landing in us and how that awareness works. But he says they believe that, that life is just this way, right? And this is how authority is, and sort of we almost create all our early images in that early environment that is just like one little aspect of reality, the way that the culture of our parents blend together, the way that we grow up in a certain time in a certain place, all is a part of that imprinting. and from especially I think when we lost a tribal, or extended family connection, we're not exposed to a lot of other kinds of people or other kinds of thinking or other kinds of, so we were so sort of isolated in our family units. And that just became, how the world was in some way. And that is how we develop all of our images kind of unconsciously. That sinks in, and we don't really recognize that we're still responding to that early world in an unconscious way. So he says on one extreme, we believe that it should be that way. And then in extreme cases, we feel especially isolated and believing that their life is like no one else's. So that may be what you were talking about, Frank. Both attitudes deviate from the truth. In both cases, the real emotion is not conscious and therefore cannot be properly evaluated and come to terms with. Thus, the child grew up never quite understanding why they are unhappy, nor even that they are unhappy. Many of you look back on childhood convinced, and I don't know in this group, but I have run into people that have thought that their childhood was great, and didn't realize that there was anything difficult with it. There are a number of parents who give great demonstrations of love. They may overindulge their children. Such spoiling and pampering may be an overcompensation and a sort of apology for a deeply suspected inability to love maturely. Children feel the truth very acutely. They may not think it or consciously observe it, but inwardly, children keenly feel the difference between mature, genuine love and the immature, over-demonstrative variety often offered instead. I think a lot of times, too, children, are kind of look around and, like, well, love, attention and love become sort of synonymous. And then attention goes to the one who's special in some way, even sometimes especially problematic or something. But, there's a way that we substitute specialness for real love because we don't even know what real love looks like. And it seems like what we want is that attention that people get when they're special in some way. And so then we feel like, well, if we're not special, we can't ever have that love, right? So we seek ways we can be special, and sometimes we find some, shtick that we can use, but oftentimes we don't, and either way, we're not, again, open to receiving the real mature love that we need. So proper guidance and security are the parents' responsibility and call for authority on their part. And there are parents who never dare to punish or exert a healthy authority, or maybe vice versa, right? So those parents are failing due to guilt because real giving, warming, comforting love is absent in their immature personalities. And so then they just go along or try to, not have healthy boundaries or, good, a good container for the children to grow up in. And then other parents may be too severe, too strict. They thereby exert a domineering authority by bullying the child and not allowing its individuality to unfold. And then there's others that just kind of withdraw and abandon the children, like just are not present for the kids, right? But all these kinds fall short as parents, and their wrong attitudes are absorbed by the child and cause the hurt and unfulfillment. In the children of the strict parents, the resentment and rebellion will be open and therefore more easily traced. In the other case, the rebellion is just as strong but hidden and infinitely harder to trace. If you had a parent who smothered you with affection or pseudo-affection, yet lacked in genuine warmth, or if you had a parent who conscientiously did everything right, but was also lacking in real warmth, and consciously you knew it as a child and you resented it. Consciously, you may have not even been aware of it at all, because when a child, you really could not put your finger on what was lacking. You were outwardly given everything you wanted and needed. How could you draw the subtle, fine, borderline distinction between real affection and pseudo-affection with your child's intellect? The fact that something bothered you without your being able to explain it rationally made you feel guilty and uncomfortable, and you therefore pushed it out of sight as far as possible. As long as the hurt, disappointment, and unfulfilled needs of your early years remain unconscious, you cannot come to terms with them. No matter how much you may love your parents, an unconscious resentment exists in you which prevents you from forgiving them for the hurt. You can only forgive and let go if you recognize your deeply hidden hurt and resentment. As an adult human being, you will see that your parents too are just human beings. They were not as faultless and perfect as the child thought and hoped. Yet they are not to be rejected now because they had their own conflicts and immaturities. The light of conscious reasoning has to be applied to these very emotions that you never allowed yourself to be fully aware of. As long as you are unaware of this conflict between your longing for a perfect love from your parents and your resentment against them, you are bound to try remedying the situation in your later years. This striving may manifest in various aspects of your life. You run constantly into problems and repeated patterns which have their origin in your attempt to reproduce the childhood situation so as to correct it. So let that sink in. That's like really a important revelation here. Do you follow what he's saying?
So it's sort of like you try to recreate situations and people in your life to kind of put yourself in the same kind of environment where you grew up, so that you could possibly change it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's a reasoning in the child that's unconscious that feels like somehow it didn't get it right. It didn't master the situation. And its job is to master the situation. Its job is to, figure it out. And you can't really master that particular situation unless you somehow recreate it. And we do that by unconsciously selecting people that, they're different. And so it can be moved, it's like, but they always have that in them that we can pull out of them. And then we try to get it right, and then we end up creating the same, pain.
And
But
also sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just and also we choose that kind of people out of familiarity.
Exactly.
As they feel familiar, and we're not quite sure. Not quite sure what is it that what the other side of it feels like.
Right. Yeah, and often, if we have not experienced love, like the real genuine love, maybe it's like that, it doesn't make us special enough. It's boring, so we don't want that kind of love, we still go out seeking the sugar high, the addiction, in a sense. So yeah. And also, I think that there's a real brilliance in this. At one level, it's this unconscious, compulsion and kind of, if we realize how we're confusing the situation, it helps. But it's like the unconscious kind of falling into that, I think, is so important because it's like, to my understanding, this was like an early trauma, right? That we experienced that didn't get held, didn't get resolved, didn't get integrated inside of us. And the guide is even saying that we actually brought that in. It was part of our sacred wounding. It was part of our soul dent that, we chose parents to activate in the incarnation so that it would be in our face, in a sense, right? And so this is one of the ways that, like, even though the desire is to kind of unconsciously suppress it or push it down and try to get away from it, run from it, like somehow unconsciously we keep calling it back. And we will do that maybe, if we judge it and be frustrated by that, it can be difficult. But if we can understand, oh, this is just another opportunity for me to see this more, to work it, to hold the child, to feel the child's unmet need and the pain there and re-educate the child, right? So that the feelings actually, even when, we're unconsciously, oh, here I am again in this same relationship that I keep falling into and I never get my needs met in it, or I never am able to really receive what they give me. I always want it differently, or I want, want it my way or something, there's something in the way. And so like in recreating that, then, it's like our life is just really dropping the pebbles and the breadcrumbs for us to follow, because that's where the journey has to go. We have to go into, through, and out the other side of that. And so we unconsciously keep, confronting it inside of ourselves until we can, wake up. And sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it doesn't even happen in a lifetime, right? And many people kind of, adapt in some way, keep trying until they give up and then just kind of collapse rather than truly surrender and, find the joy of life. They kind of let go and accept life as sort of this unfulfilling experience and sort of gradually fade away or whatever. So, there's this way that it's good not to give up. It's good to recognize, oh, if I'm here again, that's really a beautiful thing and an opportunity for me to explore and see and understand a little deeper, do more excavating. So the most frequent, go ahead.
Well, it occurs to me the hardest part for me, and I'm still working on it, is to arrive at the deep awareness that all of these things that have happened to me or the relationships I've had in the past are for my good, are for my well-being, in the sense that they never worked. And I always left them, or well, they left me, mainly me left them. And it's taken me a long time to shift from the physical or mental idea that I'm on the planet to learn and grow and evolve and to be more myself. I just couldn't. I got the words, I got the mental idea. I just couldn't turn it into a reality to live by. I'm not sure I'm making sense totally, but
I think I think I hear what you're saying, and I think this, it's difficult. What he's saying is like what frees us from this, and a lot of times, we just have to keep seeing it again and again, and what gets in the way of that is our self-judgment. Oh, I failed again, or oh, like here it is, and I'm, like we cringe and we kind of we defend, and it's hard to look at what's really going on, especially in these deeper levels, because we, have interpreted it, as another failure, which is what the guide is saying is the child is like trying to get it right this time. So if the child failed yet again, it's like then we can't feel good about ourselves. We can't feel, good about that part of our life where we're still, sort of not somehow finding that mutuality, finding that connection, finding that, those relationships that we can actually give to, right? And that's ultimately, what we have to do is shift out of this child's longing, to get this love from outside of itself, from the other person, that it didn't get when it was in its parent situation, and learn to, still thrive. It's like the child feels like I can't thrive without it. I don't have it. I need it. Somebody has to give it to me. And what we have to do is kind of feel the loss of it, which is a part of the trauma that couldn't actually be integrated at the time because we were too little and there was nobody to hold us, right? There's nobody to sit and help us feel our grief, our sadness, our disappointment, our hurting, and so we just had to suck it up and stuff it down and keep going and keep trying to get it right again, and yet somehow the dynamic that is between our parents and us, it's like it can't really, we can't get what we want. So then we have to take that loss, and work with feeling it inside of ourselves, like the guide is saying, I think, as we go further a little bit, how important it is to just feel the simple hurt of this loss, because that's what, to the child, it meant, life and death. It meant the parents didn't love it. It meant it was no good. It meant all of these huge things, right? And it was just shattering. And so we couldn't integrate that. And now with our adult presence and with our larger understanding of, our own goodness, our own uniqueness, our own, humility to accept our faults and imperfections, but to know we're basically, good people, and yes, we're still maybe lost in certain ways, but, we know we have a desire to love, we have a desire to grow, to evolve, feel inner joy, and also to give, to bring something to the world. And so when we know that, we have a child self, but we're also, this other larger aspect, then, we can hold ourselves and begin to help that child integrate what it didn't have help to integrate at the time. So
well, I hear what you're saying, but what I'm suggesting is, at least for me, I spent a lot of years reading what you're reading right now and understanding it, but not integrating it. That is to say, I didn't have a context to hold it. It just meant more mental motions that I need to do, I should do, I
Right,
must
right,
do,
exactly.
I'm doing this wrong. It was another form of that.
I
And
got
that
you.
was going nowhere.
Exactly.
So,
And in some ways, that's the first step. That's we have to see that and realize that doesn't take us where and what we're doing to ourselves when we try to do that. But you're right. Let's see if I think I can lead you guys in on kind of experiential piece with this. Let me continue reading till he gets to where he describes this exercise. And then let's try it on for size and see if that'll make a difference. Is that?
okay.
Because I definitely hear you, and we want to find a way to kind of make like, how do you do this, right? Not just conceptually, but how do you hold yourself? How do you, feel your feelings in this situation? So I'm not sure where he gets into this, but it's not too much further down, so I'm just going to continue. Important as it is to find both parents represented in your partners, it is even more important and more difficult to find those aspects which represent the parent who has particularly disappointed and hurt you. Now, you can work it from this way, and I think it's useful sort of to understand it in retrospect, but I like to really work it from the hurt back, right? So maybe just everybody sort of think of the most, like a relationship in which they still feel unfulfilled, or like they didn't, somehow they didn't get what they needed and it didn't work out right. And, so that there's still this sort of not, a piece around that. There's something niggling inside still, that doesn't sit well with the whole relationship. And so if everybody has, one, it's like just kind of like feel into like however it ended or whatever, the need that you needed didn't get met. The guide basically says, let me see if I can find this here. Skip forward a little bit. So he says, take your current problem, strip it of all the superimposed layers. So by that, it's like, I feel like, okay, so just feel it in your body, feel, maybe it's like a flashcard of this relationship, or somehow how it, the unmet need, how you represent that, but you're connecting with this issue inside of your life. And then notice where in your body it's affected, that your energy, that your body, your field, your muscles tighten, or your body feels heavy, or Like, can everybody connect those two things? And we're dropping through like all of the feelings of defense, about it being your fault, or, justifying yourself, or, like, and just kind of trying to go all the way down to, underneath even the next layer that might be anger or resentment or anxiety or frustration, like all the history behind this and the pain of the history. Behind all of these reactions, he says, you will find the hurt of not being loved. So this is a very specific hurt in this situation that you're, calling to mind. So see if you can discover that underneath everything that is there, just that simple hurt of not being loved. Can you feel, where in your body that hurt lives? So are you with me on this? Is everybody able to do that to some degree, or? You got it? Okay, good, Rich. So when we can just hold that, like, it's like, so there is a part of us that is hurt and has this hurt of not being loved. And in some ways we've been afraid to feel that. And maybe, it has deeper depths than what we're touching into right now, but it's okay. It can be just a simple hurt. It's like, it's just honoring, it's acknowledging, it's recognizing, and kind of, so some part of us is saying, I see you. I understand, this hurt of not being loved. I have compassion, empathy, sympathy for that, understanding of how that really felt for a long time, how lost you were, how empty, or, whatever it was. And see if you can, in this situation, then also like roll it back, to see that it might also be a similar hurt of not being loved as a child. So it's kind of like bringing these two hurts, the present hurt, almost like a double exposure in a camera or something, together with the childhood hurt. So does that seem to bear fruit? You make a connection there. Maybe there was a certain way as a child that you really, really wanted to be loved, and maybe any kind of old way. But usually within it, there's like this one kind of love. We wanted to be seen. We wanted to be, held. We wanted to be, feel belonging. We wanted, like what was the kind of love that, you didn't receive, that, it's part of this need and the hurt of an unmet need. It says, when you experience the hurt of not being loved in your current dilemma, it will serve to reawaken the childhood hurt. And so while you face the present hurt, think back and try to reconsider the situation with your parents, what they gave you, how you really felt about them. You'll become aware that in many ways you lacked a certain something you never clearly saw before, or maybe you guys have seen it, but, you can see it a little deeper, a little more clear, and see how maybe, it's really something you didn't quite want to see fully. And you'll find that this must have hurt you when you were a child, but you may have forgotten this hurt on a conscious level. But it's not forgotten at all. The hurt of the current problem is the very same hurt. So by just feeling and being with that hurt, we're being with the child. We're being back in that, original situation. And we're saying, I see you, and I can breathe into this hurt, and I can, hold you in this hurt. And I can, be a strong enough, support so that if you want to, release this pain into my arms, you can drop all the way into that hurt and let your body transform it into sobs and tears and releasing. And if you're not, hung up in your judgment, but you're truly there holding the child, it will, feel like a healing and like a kind of the first time the child has been free of a deep pain and weight and sadness and loss. So, but he's saying, the main thing we have to kind of really work to succeed in crystallizing the pain that you're experiencing and synchronizing these two pains to realize they're one and the same. And then there are some steps where we can, actually work with the child and re-educate and reparent the child from this place, but the first step is just to kind of really allow the feeling, and stop trying to push it away, deny it, control it, be afraid of it. So is everybody able to kind of in some way get a sense of, like what that might look like, or did a little bit of it internally in your process there? Any questions or comments?
I can if nobody else does.
Go ahead, Dick.
At the risk of being kind of skeptical here, here's a problem I have with this, what you just described, Darlene, is usually when those situations come up, it's usually socially or in some kind of relationship, but it doesn't bear the kind of fruit you're talking about of dropping into it and feel the emotion deeply. I mean, it's just gets triggered, and there's no place to do that at the time, if you know what I mean. So
you have to learn how to do it later.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is later, it isn't as strong. It doesn't get as triggered as it is in the moment, or when it really gets triggered. And I can see it, and I think that's valuable, absolutely, and have the perspective that, oh, I'm being triggered, and there's a lesson here for me.
I think when you're triggered, you're just triggered in the defense. And so you don't really need to go back into that, right? That's not where we're trying to get. You don't need to feel the trigger of the defense and the big explosion or the big intensity of reaction and feeling. It's the simple hurt of it.
No, I get that. I mean, I can roll in and I can get that the hurts from childhood, etc. But I'm saying there's no place to do anything with the hurt except recognize it at the moment. So, at least in my case, maybe other people are in different circumstances.
And sometimes react to it, So like, again, life is not like the goal is not stop reacting. The goal is once you've reacted and you see that you're in this pain, it's like the pain body is activated again. Right. Then you need to consciously decide to work it for the next 3 or 4 weeks, or, or in your session, go in and because, when it's fresh, it's always in you. And part of it is also learning how you re-access these places when you're not so triggered, because you can't really get to them when you're that triggered. Right. And mostly what you're in is just your defense. So it's good to really be past that, and where you can do this deeper work of being with the feeling long enough to let it develop and move in you. I mean, you can sit there and find that hurt right now. And if we had time in an individual session, like we would just kind of explore, well, how can we actually bring you to a point where you are deeply sobbing from that hurt, and allowing those tears to move through your body, because the body knows how to digest and release the pain, but you're unconsciously holding on to it in a lot of different ways. So we have to just keep going in and unhooking one hook to another hook, until we can free the movement of the natural expression of the sadness. And it's there in full, but you keep yourself at a distance in certain ways. It's part of the defense mechanism. So we have to basically, it's all about the resistance to feeling the feeling, and all the work is about unraveling that resistance, unwinding it, moving it out of the way.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. My experience is it only will release itself when it's ready to release itself. I can't force it. I can't.
No, you can't
sit there
force
and
it, and you
try
can't
to-
do it with your outer will. That's right. But you can make a space and invite it. And you can be in relationship with it as a guiding force, as your own, in some ways archetypally, this is a descent into the underworld. And so you need, what do they call those guides in the underworld? Some kind of a pomp and something. But anyway, underworld guide, so you need to be with yourself, going into these places, with kind of your higher self presence, holding your hand.
Yeah, your adult self has to actually know how to hold the wounded child. That part of the equation is not so easy.
It's not.
Making the adult self that skilled is a difficult part of the experiential. Very difficult.
It's problematic, and it's not only it's difficult also because we resist it. Like there's a way, like when we think about it, that we don't want to hold ourselves. The idealized self-image has decided that how we make ourselves be the way we want to be is by punishment and correction and self-hatred, and just being a lousy friend. It's like it's a critic, it's a bully, it's an inner terrorist. And we think, well, how can I love myself? It's those parts can't, right? So we got to find another part that is willing. And if you're not, why aren't you? Why don't you love yourself? You have to look at how you withhold from yourself, and how you're actively, in a space of withholding. And that can help you then awaken a deeper place that sees and has compassion and wants to hold you.
Yeah. I might also say that in this last paragraph here, where he says experiencing these similarities emotionally will carry you further on the particular road towards dissolving this basic conflict. Mere intellectual evaluation will not yield any benefit. Well, I'd like to say that the difference, the chasm between the subconscious in this and the conscious in this is gigantic. Okay, in terms of the human predicament, people who have no idea what they're trying to recreate and heal in their subconscious, the difference between that and actually having a conscious understanding of it, well, I do believe that the intellectual evaluation is kind of a bridge.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you have to have some understanding of this. It's just not it's not sufficient to do the
Not sufficient to do the
transformation.
experiential work, but it is a bridge.
And you can't really do that experiential work until you have some understanding and can imagine it, can accept it, can allow for the possibility of it. And like the guide then says, try it on for size and see if what he's saying bears out, right? He never says we have to believe anything or anything like that, but we do have to have, some kind of, and again, for me, like it always kind of like I'll react to something, and I know I'm in a reaction. I know I'm feeling stronger than what the situation might really call for, or I'm in a kind of like adolescent or rebellious or teen, or kind of like child kind of. I can tell my negative, it's not an adult mature, like even if I were going to object or try to reason with somebody, or but I'm kind of like I'm acting out like a 2-year-old in some ways, right? And I can feel when I get into that. Now I can't always control it right away, but I'm usually somehow somewhat aware. Okay, so I'm in one of these, like something is possessing me, is what it feels like, right? I've got this energy that's alive in me, that got triggered in me, and it's how it feels, and it feels real, and then I'm just going with it and I can't stop it. But it also sort of there's some recognition that it's over the top, or there's something else going with it. And so when I can at least be conscious that way, then I have to wait till I can wake up enough inside of it to actually go be with it. And one way that I find is helpful, right? When I have the time and space, I have to kind of withdraw, go inside, right? I can't stay engaged right in that moment. But I go inside, and then I really feel like what's going on in my body, like what's, maybe I'm all charged up, or maybe I have a deep pain in my belly or in my heart, or, I'm, my shoulders all tense and my jaws tight, like, so I just feel what is the body, because it's kind of like now it's channeling this energy. And so I can observe this energy in me by sort of waking up the observer, and it's not identifying, oh, that's not me, that's my pain body, that's not me. So that's a part of the steps that as we practice this, we begin to realize, well, it's a part of me, it's my immature child, or it's this demon possessing me, or whatever, however you want to characterize it. But you begin to recognize, not that you don't have responsibility for it, but that it really isn't all of you. It isn't, like necessarily the truth in the moment. It's something that has swept into you, and you can, just maybe at some point shut it down and try to make yourself, leave it or make it go away. And sometimes when we have the capacity to do that, it's good to do that, that rebuking and that sort of maintaining our adult presence. But when we can't, the next thing best we can do is when we wake up enough, we have to go in, and in that moment is the best time, just as you're waking up out of it, if you can. And then if you can't, you can usually, have a session within a few days and still have enough of it present that you can, sort of really get sort of helped to go down into that pain and move it through.
Yeah, and that's you as a path worker manifesting your conscious understanding of this material. Take someone who doesn't have a clue. What are they doing? They're consistently marrying and divorcing the same personality, trying to subconsciously hoping that if something happens in
they just do it different,
marriage, and it gets right, that they'll subconsciously heal the wound that they're carrying from the parent who treated them the worst. It's like, oh my God.
People are very lost. Yeah. Like the normal average human consciousness is very asleep.
Yes. Yes, and
So even us,
it's
even though we're still
it's manifesting in compulsive, destructive behavior over
right.
and over and over again.
And even though we have like a little bit more awake because we understand what we're doing, you know, we are equally as asleep when we're in reaction, when we're possessed by our pain bodies.
And we're triggered, yes.
Right. And so, you know, it's like luckily we can wake up out of it, you know, and we can use being triggered as a wake up call, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, there I am again, right? You know, like wake up. And then when I get enough awake, then I can go in, and there is the time to hold it. There is the time to understand, oh, I must be reacting like that because there's some really strong fear or pain or, you know, trauma, you know, in me to make me, you know, go like that. So then I want to seek to, you know, connect with the original suffering, you know, this sensitive child that, you know, felt something that was didn't know what to do with and was so beyond it, and I can't remember it. I'm not going to remember an event in my mind or anything like that, but it's in my body. It's held in the cells and in the energy. And so by going into those places and using my breath and using, you know, my intention to let go of my unconscious defenses, you know, any tension that I'm holding, any blocks that I'm making, I'm clamping in my throat, I'm tightening my stomach, you know, it's like we do it, but we can kind of systematically go into our body and work and say to the defenses, I'm here, it's okay, you can let go. I'm willing to feel this, right? And we help each one of those places where we're blocking the feeling, where we're stuffing the feeling, where we're trying to hold the feeling, we individually let it go. And at some point, you know, the movement goes through our whole body. And, you know, we're, you know, maybe releasing, generally it's releasing in this pain of the tears, you know, and we can only release when the child feels when we're touching it, when we're seeing it, and it's as if it had never been seen before by anybody, and finally we see it, and that takes it even deeper. It couldn't feel this pain, it couldn't let it go until it finally felt seen. And then is when it, you know, it pours out of us in a way that is, you know, like not the recycling of the, you know, loss, but is the recognition that the loss is complete, and you can let go of all of the pain that you've held all this time from that.
Yeah, it's a big release. Agree with everything. It's sort of, so it starts with the physical sensations in your body, tapping into that, and then see if maybe the intellect could sort of assist you in this by questioning how it feels, what it reminds you, what this feeling reminds you of. Yeah, and some random memory will pop up, and then you try to go deeper into that memory and try to see what it makes you, how it made you feel at that moment. And then yeah, a lot of things will come out and release, and like Darlene was saying, it's immense release and realization after experiencing that release. And I feel like intellectuality would, like Frank pointed out, it is sort of a bridge. It's needed, but it's kind of like, it's like you go in a gym and they introduce you, they tell you, you know, what the machines they have there and all of that, and they tell you about how they work and things like that, and now you feel like you master it all, you know it, but you don't get to the result unless you run on them and you use them. So it's like, and by running, I mean just going through that emotional maturity, emotional feelings, and getting accustomed to feel, to get your body feel through all the pain, to tap into something bigger.
Right.
Because
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like within the intellectuality, just there's so many. That's why I guess they say there are several kinds of intellect. There's emotional, there's mental, and I feel like, yeah, just understanding things a lot. Some of the times is not enough to make this release and make this shift.
Yeah, there's a process of well, coming back into our bodies. I like this idea that it's like embodied awakening because we have so disconnected and are so dissociated from our, like real self, and it's in our body, and it's in the feelings. So that certainly, is as I think, again, you have to have the bridge to invite people to go there, for them to understand why they would even want to go there. Or how to work a little bit once they're there. And then I think it's also, like you're saying, all of this finding your way, but it's like as the feelings come, like it's almost like the realization, the connections get made. So it's even a deeper understanding, which to me is sort of also this larger intellect, this larger awareness happens, but it's coming like so our feelings are the energy, right? Store the memory, have everything there. So it's kind of like this, it's decoding that energy. And when we let the feeling go through us in a spontaneous way and we're feeling with it, we're feeling into it, we're really present to what's moving through us. It's like at the same time all this understanding kind of falls into place, and all of these connections get made through our lifetimes and through that life or through this life, and there's something that kind of integrates and comes to peace inside. And sometimes it like more than once we have to go through this. It's not like always a once and done, but to have the ability, because the guide is saying like what we're resisting is feeling this original pain. And some of this is our will, like resistance is will, right? And he's saying here that when we feel the similarities while at the same time experiencing the pain of now and the pain of then, we will slowly come to understand how you thought you had to choose the current situation because deep inside you, you could not possibly admit defeat. So there's this, this level of kind of surrender that's also trying to take place here, acceptance of what was, acceptance, that it hurt like hell and it was shitty, but we made it. And maybe somehow that suffering, was part of what brought us where we are today. Right. And that we can, we don't have to fix it or get it right, or, we weren't defeated in the first place. We didn't do anything wrong in the first place, ultimately. And so there's this kind of will-backed aspect of it as well that, is sort of surrendering into what our experience was. And that's the other thing that, we're trying to, correct ourselves, get it right this time. We're always trying to control ourselves, make ourselves be a certain way, make the relationship, and all of that is this manipulation of the ego by the ego, and it usually doesn't bring us much happiness or even much real experience, right? I watch myself do that a lot, and when I'm doing it, I'm aware, like it's almost like I'm not present for my real life, and I'm trying to figure out why my life is this way instead of that way, or what's wrong with me, or like all of that creates this sphere of consciousness that I'm living in when I could be living in this, light of the sun, the moon, and the stars, the beauty of this moment now, however it is, maybe even the pain of this moment now. But if I'm fully with it, it will, be, a fabulous kind of, truth and reality, right? Way beyond all my images of how it should be. Just how it is already everything we need. So if we can keep dropping into and surrendering into and being with, including the pain of, the relationship, that doesn't, that somehow got recreated. And just let ourselves, revisit and know the truth of, in a conscious way of that early childhood suffering, and hold the child in that, right? And restore the connection, and we're the only person that the child will believe when we really tell that child that wasn't her fault. She was really okay. And the truth, so that's a part of what we're trying to do, is make the connection with the child, let the child release the pain, so that then we can help the child remember, reconnect with reality, with the truth, out of this, out of these images, out of this, painful beliefs that we've accumulated and keep living out of. So there's a kind of sense of redemption sometimes, even, in it.
Are you open to any more challenges, or should we go on with that?
No, I'm open to as many challenges as you. I get that this is really hard and people don't understand and don't know how to apply it. And I don't know if I can always help you, but if I can, I'm happy to try give it a shot at it.
Okay, I'm challenging your description of going through the process. It's not my experience, meaning that when I go through my process, when I get into triggered by what somebody says, which happens all the time, or does, I can look at it, I can see it, and I can spot and I'm triggered in it often, more times than not. And later I can look at it, or I can use Joyce to look at it. We can mirror it back and forth. But for me, with rare exceptions, the process is a slow, step by step. It's not a diving down deep, going into the weeping and gnashing of teeth. It doesn't work that way for me. It's this, I'm getting somewhere, I can feel it, but it is not what I'm hearing you describe. Is you got to go all the way down, feel all the pain, and if you don't do that, you're not going to be released, and you have to keep coming. That's kind of, for me, that's a negative approach. What works for me in my life so far, what's coming up, at least the awareness I'm having, is I try to push myself. Well, I need to feel this deeper, and I need to get down into it. And it's like, no, what I'm getting is pushback from there. And
yeah, you don't want to be, you're going to force it, correct?
Is that it's taking it, what I'm hearing, and I'm getting guidance from my guidance, is this one step at a time. Don't go diving too deep. Don't try to end it all in one fell swoop or even one lifetime. But it's the process. I'm in the process. That's the secret. It's not how far I go. It's not how deep I go. It's not how much crying I do. It's sometimes, rarely, that is the process, but rarely it gives it 100%. It's all a step-by-step process. So that's kind of what I wanted to share.
Okay. And I can respect that. And, everybody is unique in kind of the steps and how they move with it, and different stages and time. So I think what the guide is saying here, though, is that, like, as long as we can't, if we're afraid of this pain, if we're afraid of this defeat, then we're going to continue to kind of defend against it. So if we want to, in anything, if we want to go beyond the place of habitual automatic defense, like the only way that, like we no longer have to defend is to not be afraid of it. And the only way we can not be afraid of it is by feeling it and knowing what it is.
It's fine, as long as it takes, it's just that it takes steps for me. And that's what I actually deeply feel guided in from a higher source, that it's like, stop pushing it, stop forcing it.
I'm completely with you there, Dick. And I think that, this is, it's kind of, I don't know, so it's built into our language. It's built into so many things. It's hard to, I do my best not to promote that, because I'm never saying that. I'm never saying push yourself. I'm never saying use your outer will to do anything. It's not possible. It only tangles you up into knots. So I'm totally with you there. I am saying though that there's a way that we can consciously invite ourselves. We can learn to, like, it's not like get there, but notice what's stopping you from getting there. Oh, I'm, tightening my throat muscles. Well, can you, be with your throat muscles and just kind of gently ask them to relax? And maybe they do a little, and, however much, maybe they don't at all. That's totally fine. But, you can ask them, right? You can invite them. And then sometimes, what do you feel when you do that? Because then you learn a little bit more of what's going on. And at some point, you might get to this point where, like, all the floodgates open, and a spontaneous feeling. You can't make yourself cry in the way I'm talking about. This is completely spontaneous. It's completely involuntary. You just have to get yourself out of the way for it to happen. And, that's a gradual process
You
to
get
learn
yourself out of the way.
how
I mean, that's
to
a
do that.
forcing current right there. So
To get yourself out of the way, you feel like so how do I describe, like you may turn it into a forcing current because that's your tendency, right? I'm just describing that the conscious work that we do is to question and examine and explore the resistance. We can't make anything spontaneous happen. We can't, manifest our higher self. We can't connect to our hearts. We can't make ourselves love. Nothing can happen by the outer will. But we can notice, oh, I'm disconnected from my heart and I'm not feeling loving. And then we can notice in our body what that's like. And then we can see where the blocks are in our body and just kind of go in and explore, can you relax right there a minute and just to see what might happen. Let's explore, right? And then, maybe nothing happens, or we hear the voice saying, no way, I'm never going to let go, and so we learn more. It's a way of understanding, what's inside of us more that way. But it's never from an outer, you should do something place. It's a part of some of the steps that can be taken in the work when you're doing what I call a process meditation.
yeah, I hear what you're saying. Your process is just different than mine. Is basically what we're talking about. And I'm not talking about the forcing current and the intellect. I'm listening to spirit. I'm listening to source.
Yeah.
And for me, the message often is because I've used
because you push, not push,
to
right?
Relax and not go into there, and that's enough.
Exactly,
right
and that's the message completely. Relax is the entire message, but you can consciously notice where you're not relaxing and invite it to relax, right?
Well, that's okay. Maybe that's your process. I hear that. Okay.
And it's also like, I'm not saying you should do all of this. I'm saying you should follow, or you're doing fine following your own inner guidance. That's what the inner process is about. But I'm saying that this is also where it can lead you to, in time, where you will be, guided, because this is how I discovered it. I was guided there, right? And it's got like being guided inside of ourselves into these places in our inner territory. And then learning about them.
My guidance might be different than your guidance for who I am and for who you are.
Right. But it's still like when we say, the guide says we need to feel all our feelings. All right. So the like what he's saying in this lecture is we can take many, many steps, and like the healing comes from the feeling. Right. And so if we're still in this place where we're afraid, or we haven't yet experienced, maybe we don't even feel it as fear, but we just, we're not, allowing, say, like the sadness and, to come through our bodies in a spontaneous expression, then, maybe that's exactly who you are. And it's, it's not that you should go any further, but it's kind of like something where you could wonder, right? Is there a block there that is still coming from sort of my control and my fear? And if so, it's a query, an inner inquiry. What am I afraid of here? Is there a way I can help myself overcome, or, and this will, come through, in its divine timing, in your own, you can't get there before you're there.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
it's just other ways that you work inside of yourself, examples of that. And maybe you'll never use any of these, I don't know. But I think it's like the more we can try to describe, these inner processes, because we are so not used to, describing them, or, talking about them. We don't even have language that much for it. Right?
I think you guys are talking about the same things, to be honest. It's the ego that wants to force it to figure something out.
Mhm.
Even it could look like completely positive thing. Oh, I'm trying to get to the core of it. I'm trying to, to get rid of this pain, of this trauma. But
The minute that you're trying to get rid of something, you're not integrating, you're trying to
Yeah.
separate. So
Yeah.
that right there tells you, so you have to embrace, you have to accept, you have to welcome, you have to be with, you have to dwell with, you have to, relax into, and nothing. And when I say you have to, again, yes, we could try to force that, but that doesn't work. You have to invite yourself, to go into that space of presence and love, self-relaxation, self-connection. And
Yeah.
then from inside yourself, you'll lead yourself.
Yeah, by gentle love. That's what it was.
Exactly. Gentle love. And that's what, for me, is this, shift into this different relationship with ourselves, right? Whereas most of the time, how we're relating to ourselves is from our critics, right? We're unhappy, we're dissatisfied, or didn't do that right. I remember this weekend, I wanted to, like it was the end of a ceremony and people kind of opened it up for anybody to offer a song. And I always get like confused about all of that, because a part of me likes to share, and I want to share in a good way. But then when I stand up to share, I always end up getting ungrounded and, sort of stage fright. And so then, like, I sang the song, it was fine, but, it was like about 3 octaves higher than it should have been. And, it didn't come across in the way that I wanted. So, like right there, I'm risking, I'm moving out, but it always doesn't quite come out the way that I was hoping, right, or whatever. And so then, we have to deal with, how we're unhappy with ourselves, or we're, pressing in on, some kind of, self-generated, I don't know how to describe it, but just, like we're not okay with who we were, with what was, with what is. Sometimes it can be not what you did, but what somebody else did, And so so much of this is like learning just to be with everything that is. And where we're, relaxing into that, where we're learning to just be present to that, to breathe it, to trust it. And then from there, it will, guide us from inside, like Dick is saying. Okay, so I mean, again, the guide is describing like mostly a process where he's saying we have to compare hurts, we have to feel, we have to, bring these two things together and make the connection. And again, so many times when I'm reacting and know where I'm reacting, if I drop in and I go below the defensive reaction and go into this, place where I'm, vulnerable and hurt in some way, that, there's this, need to be there and hold myself, and be willing to just feel, the pain of it. And it always feels like if I'm feeling it from, oh, here I am, I'm so fucked up and did this again, and it's, I'm stuck in it. Like that's like the story, the drama, the trauma. If I'm just going in and feeling, oh, here it is, like this tension, in my belly, I breathe and I open that, and then that drops into, like somehow the energy starts sobbing and flowing out of me, right? And then as the energy is flowing, there's more that comes in understanding. And that's not what I was planning on saying. I can't remember. I lost my train of thought here, but we're, kind of just working to keep looking at, the guide is saying we have to feel the pain. And that's kind of the fundamental issue, is that we feel like the pain is unsurvivable at some level. And that's why we've created all of this defense around it to try to avoid it. But the truth is, it was really big and really intense because we were really little, and we didn't have any resources to deal with it, and we were left with it alone. But it's different now. And so to be configured always to, like avoid that pain and, kind of try to control our lives and construct our lives around that is, prevents the flow of the life force and the freedom of, all of the feelings of life. And so when we can, trust and learn how to feel and allow the body to digest all of the feelings, it makes a difference for us. And the journey to get there, is a gradual one. So, he says, how much more wonderful it is for a person to choose this path with the wisdom and conviction that a hidden conflict in the long run does as much damage as a manifest one. They will not fear to uncover the real emotion and will feel, even in the temporary experience of acute pain, that in that moment it turns into a healthy, growing pain, free of bitterness, tension, anxiety, and frustration. There are also those who tolerate the pain, but in a negative way, always expecting it to be remedied from the outside. Some people are in a way nearer to the solution because for them it would be quite easy to see how the childish process still operates. The outside is the offending parent or both parents projected onto other human beings. They have only to redirect the approach to their pains. They do not have to find it. So again, whatever's, out there, if it creates a disharmony, a reaction, we can go in and strip it of all of the outer layers and just try to drop into the simple hurt of not being loved. And whenever we can do that, we can hold that place inside of us and help heal it. So only after experiencing all these emotions, synchronizing the now and the then, will you become aware of how you tried to correct the situation. You will further see the folly of the unconscious desire to recreate the childhood hurt. How you managed to do that, you can kind of begin to recognize, the connections. And you can see the frustrating uselessness of it, and yet, like to get caught up in that is not useful either, right? So you will survey all your actions and reactions with this new understanding and insight, whereupon you will release your parents. You will leave your childhood truly behind and start a new inner behavior pattern that will feel infinitely more constructive and rewarding for you and for others. You will no longer seek to master the situation you could not master as a child. You will go on from where you are, forgetting and forgiving truly inside of you without even thinking that you have done so. You will no longer need to be loved as you needed to be loved when you were a child. First, you become aware that this is what you still wish, and then you no longer seek this kind of love. Since you are no longer a child, you will seek love in a different way, by giving it instead of expecting it. It must always be emphasized, however, that many people are not aware that they do expect it. Since the childish unconscious expectation was so often disappointed, they made themselves give up all expectations and desire for love, sort of on the top, right? Needless to say, this is neither genuine nor healthy. To be fruitful and bring real results, the process of giving up the recreation must go beyond mere intellectual knowledge. You have to allow yourself to feel the pain of certain unfulfillments now, and also the pain of the unfulfillment of your childhood. Then compare the two until, like two separate picture slides, they gradually move into focus and become one. Once this happens, the insight you gain and the experience you feel exactly as you say, as I say here, will enable you to take the further steps indicated. So does that make sense?
Yes.
It's all a process.
To work on this inner conflict is of great importance for some of my friends who have made sufficient progress on this path. They need these instructions to give them a new outlook and further clarification. My words will enable them to proceed in the proper direction. For others who are not yet that far advanced, for those who have not really begun a self-search, these words may perhaps be somewhat obscure. Intellectually, you may understand quite well, but you will be unable as yet to apply them to your own emotions and life problems. Nevertheless, I urge you all to think about this. The time will come when you will glean a new understanding about yourself from these words. Perhaps an occasional glimpse, even now a temporary flickering emotion that these words may cause in you, will be of help and open a door towards knowing yourself better, toward evaluating your life with a more realistic and more mature outlook. So, I don't know, people were saying they might need to leave early. Is this a place to break for anybody that needs to do that?
That would be me.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay.
Good night, everybody. Thank
So
you, Doc.
thank you for coming. Thanks you for all the good questions. And yeah, this it's not an easy lecture to read and talk because the guide covers a lot of things, but I think that we hit the most important pieces, and hopefully it was, clear that it's, when you talk about the process and the stages of it, it's like it has to unfold, not from an outer will and a forcing current, but from the inner, organic inner process. So good night, everybody.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night, darling. Thanks for letting me challenge you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good. It's good for me. I don't always know that I do a good job, but happy to do it. Skylar, are you staying on or are you leaving too? Good
I can
night.
stay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can continue to read some of these Q&As if you want, see if there any of them are useful. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So the first question is, it's difficult for me to understand that one continually chooses a love object who has exactly the same negative trends that one or the other parent had. Is it reality that this particular person has these trends, or is it projection and response? Answer, it can be both and it can be neither. It can be either. In fact, most of the time it is a combination. Certain aspects are unconsciously looked for and found, and they are actually similar. But the existing similarities are enhanced by the person who is doing the recreation. And they are not only projected qualities seen while they are not really there, but are also latent in some degree without being manifest. And then these are encouraged and strongly brought to the fore by the attitude of the person with the unrecognized inner problem. He or she fosters something in the other person by provoking the reaction that is similar to the parents. The provocation, which of course is entirely unconscious, is a very strong factor here. So does that make sense? Like, that, and oftentimes when we're in a relationship, actually, it's like we selected them to recreate our childhood hurts, and they selected us to create their childhood hurts. And there's actually an inner connected dynamic, right? Where, our provocation brings out their, defense, which is the same as our parents' defense, but they're not defending to the same thing that, we're defending and creating their defense around their, it's like a different story. It's their own inner story, but it feels the same in our world. So now we're projecting our story onto them, so it's always can get very interesting to work out in couples, when two people are working together like that, because you can kind of tease it out and separate it and see like how exactly, the one person's recreating other person's situation and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
The sum total of a human personality consists of many aspects. Out of these, let's say 3 or 4 may be actually similar to some traits in the recreator's parent. The more outstanding would be a similar kind of immaturity and incapacity to love, right? So in some way, the person is a little maybe withdrawn or disconnected, doesn't really care, not demonstrative, whatever, and so, that is a similar trait in the parent, and it, seems to, the more you ask for it, the more they withdraw, right? So then, your need, creates their avoidance, and that creates the trigger of your wound. And that alone is sufficient and potent enough, in essence, to reproduce the same situation. The same person would not react to others as he or she reacts to you, because it is you who constantly do the provoking, thereby reproducing conditions similar to your childhood for you to correct. Your fear, your self-punishment, your frustration, your anger, your hostility, your withdrawal from giving out love and affection, all these trends of the child in you constantly provoke the other person and enhance a response coming from that part which is weak and immature. However, a more mature person will affect others differently and will bring out that in them which is mature and whole, for there is no person who does not have some mature aspects. So the good news about this is really, if even one person is conscious and can sort of shift and the dynamic and start responding out of the maturity, then you can bring the other person into, a healed dynamic with you. It doesn't take, the other person has to get it and change, right? Which we always kind of think is what has to happen. If we change, it will change the other person in the relationship. And then if they don't change, then we know very clearly, okay, this is their shit. This is probably not the person for me, right?
Right. But I think it does, like the change in you, even just dynamic, the whole dynamic will change, and it will just subconsciously drag that person. Just a genuine change, genuine intentions of yours, not to change that person, but rather kind of, heal your own wounds will
Right.
definitely move, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. So if we can take responsibility and make the connection with, our own defenses, and, so we have the childhood wound, we have a defense around it. That defense actually then creates, the provocation for the other person to react the way our parent did,
Right.
and so there's a vicious circle. And if we can, stop our part of it, then the vicious circle doesn't get manifested.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very confused about thought control. I find it terribly tiring to be constantly alert during the entire day, to live in the immediate here and now. Yet in my work, I am entirely submerged, absorbed, and wholly concentrated. I can remain concentrated even for hours, but afterwards I find it relaxing to let my mind wander and not use it like a spotlight beam on everything that happens around me. Answer: this is a great misunderstanding. I never implied that you should constantly have your mind poised, let alone be tense in your mind. You do not have to steadily concentrate on a particular subject. That is not the way to go about it. If you can bring yourself to engage in this 5-minute exercise every day in the most relaxed way, you will find that gradually you will naturally become more alert and more awake in an unforced way. It is a gradual process of growth that happens without direct volition, without forcing. If you relax and let your mind wander after a strain, that is fine. There is nothing wrong in that. I never said that you should do these concentration exercises for 24 hours a day. I said you should try it for about 5 minutes a day. There's a great difference in that. After becoming a little proficient, you will automatically and without strain be more alert and concentrated without fatigue. You will then begin to function better in many ways. The fact that it makes you tired to be right here in the now, and that your spirit has to wander away, is a sign of some mismanagement in your inner makeup. Every person needs an occasional rest during which the spirit leaves the body. This happens regularly during sleep. But if the spirit has to half wander away during waking hours in order to be relaxed, it means that there is something that is not properly managed between the spirit, the body, and the mind. It has many damaging effects in making you miss out on life, and you're not seeing and perceiving reality and people around you. In order to remedy the situation, you should not forcefully concentrate during all your waking hours. Many psychological factors play a role and bring about this mismanagement. Your further development in that direction will be of importance, but the 5-minute exercise will help. One of the psychological factors responsible for the tendency to let the spirit wander away is fear. Fear of life, therefore fear of being in the present reality of life, and fear of coping with life. Another factor is a certain egocentricity, a lack of interest in what is going on, and a feeling that is more pleasant to wander in the clouds. But I repeat, this process should not and cannot be changed by constantly forcing yourself to occupy your thoughts and minds with things that do not interest you. This must be a natural process which develops organically. In doing the concentration exercises, you will eventually discover a very gradual, slow change. You will become naturally more alert to the present and more observant. You will take an interest in what is around you without feeling tension within yourself. Question. You have stated that emotional maturity is the willingness and the capability to love. It seems to me that intellectual maturity must mean something else. How do the two interplay and influence each other? Answer. Both are necessary functions of the healthy individual. As I once put it, they are like the two legs you need in order to walk through life. Intellectual maturity is your capacity to think, to judge, to evaluate, to discriminate, to form concepts, to plan, to use your will, to use your mind, to make decisions, to utilize your assets, to direct your life, and last but not least, to educate or re-educate the childish emotions by implanting your own concepts that you have arrived at independently by thinking things through. We have to become our own inner authority and then re-educate the child from there. Not because others have said so, but because you deliberated on them and thereby made them your own. Thus, your intellect can influence your emotions through your capacity to think. On the other hand, unchecked and childish emotions can influence your thinking capacity by coloring your views and making you lose objectivity. Your capacity to think is intellectual maturity, and the way you manage your emotional reactions, feelings, and instincts determines your emotional maturity or lack of it. Question. Might one be developed much further in one direction than in another? Indeed, very often there is an imbalance between these two legs, and with one leg more developed than the other. This imbalance hinders the integration of the human being. Among other aspects, the purpose and aim of this work is to achieve a proper balance. In many instances, a person is more developed in one direction or one area of the personality, with a weakness in the other. Many who do not pursue a path such as yours continue to nurse and cultivate the already overdeveloped aspect. That, of course, is not healthy. It does not bring the desired harmony and balance. It is done because people prefer to think of their strengths rather than of their weaknesses. And this is where, it's a little bit of a study for me too. We're talking about this organic unfolding development, and we can't use our forcing current and our outer will. And yet I think here's where the guide is kind of pointing to, at times the tendency is to follow the line of least resistance, and so it's not like we should use a forcing current or an outer will to, make ourselves work on the undeveloped aspects. But I think we can recognize and we can see and we can pray and we can choose in our heart and we can ask for guidance to, help us find a way to, be with it, look at it more deeply, help it, get better. And so, it's a kind of like it's in the free will process, right? Not in the, actual doing of it, but in the inner choice that we make. And in that choice, while we make it, we may not be able to activate it or actualize it right away, but the choice in itself has this profound power And, we can keep re-choosing it even, and keep reaffirming our choice. And that keeps moving the material, the unconscious and the higher self levels, further along. And will bring those opportunities, for us to see, okay, I can apply myself here a little bit. I want to, and then we do, and that develops the muscle a little more. But we're not doing it because we should, and we got to get out there and like exercise for 15 minutes and make sure we do 1,000 repetitions or whatever, all of that. We can do it from a place of, the opportunities arising, and we know we've asked for them, and we simply take advantage and join in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, question: What would you say that emotional immaturity is indicated by an emphasis on strong likes and dislikes without discriminating as to what the values are? We use the wrong yardstick. Instead of measuring and discriminating, we are either for or against something because we like or dislike it, regardless of its intrinsic merit. Exactly, that is the subjectivity that arises out of childish emotions. Of course, a halfway intellectually mature person will find adequate reason to hide this emotional reaction and subjectivity. That is what is called rationalization. Thus, an intellectually mature person will find reasons and explanations for his irrational emotion, subjective behavior, or attitude.
Yeah, so accurate.
Question: At one time, you said that you could hear the soul scream. Does that also work between the different subconscious minds of two separate human beings? Does one subconscious hear the screaming of the other? Is that why one feels the hostility emanating from the other person? Answer: yes. That is why I always say that your subconscious affects the subconscious of the other person. You go through life resenting other people because they do not respond to your outer actions. You yourself are unaware of what your inner actions are. Your inner actions or reactions are accurately perceived by your fellow human beings, and they react to that part of yourself. Their souls hear that voice or perceive it with other inner sense organs of hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting. That is why the subconscious of one affects the subconscious of the other. So often people feel unjustly treated when they know their actions were quite right. They concentrate on all the outer right actions, but leave out the inner unconscious motivations which existed in addition to the conscious and proper outer ones. If you learn to be utterly honest with yourself and acknowledge your hidden motivations and feelings, you will then understand why other people react to you as they do, and you will no longer consider yourself the victim of injustice. How can I make the distinction as to whether the other person provoked me or I the other person? Answer: it is not necessary to find who started it, for this is a chain reaction, a vicious circle. It is useful to start by finding your own provocation, perhaps in response to an open or hidden provocation of the other person. Thus, you will realize that because you were provoked, you provoked the other person. And because you do so, the other again responds in kind. But as you examine your real reason, not the superficial one, the reason why you were hurt in the first place, and therefore provoked, according to tonight's lecture, we will no longer regard this hurt as disastrous. You will have a different reaction to the hurt, and as a consequence, the hurt will diminish automatically. Therefore, you will no longer feel the need to provoke the other person. Also, as the need to reproduce the childhood situation decreases, you will become less withdrawn, and you will hurt others less and less so that they will not have to provoke you. If they do, you will now also understand that they reacted out of the same childish blind needs as you did. Now you can see how you ascribe different motivations to the other person's provocation than to your own, even if and when you actually realize that you initiated the provocation. As you gain a different view on your own hurt, understanding its real origin, you will gain the same detachment from the reaction of the other person. You will find exactly the same reactions in yourself and in the other. As long as the child's conflict remains unresolved in you, the difference seems enormous. But when you perceive reality, you begin to break the repetitive vicious circle. As you truly perceive such a mutual interplay, it will relieve the feeling of isolation and guilt you are all burdened with. You are constantly fluctuating between your guilt and your accusation of injustice you direct at those around you. The child in you feels itself entirely different from others in a world of its own. It lives in such a damaging illusion. As you solve this conflict, your awareness of other people will increase. And yet you are so unaware of the reality of other people. On the one hand, you accuse them and are inordinately hurt by them because you do not understand yourself and therefore do not understand the other person. On the other hand, at the same time, you refuse to become aware when you are hurt. This seems paradoxical, yet it is not. As you experience for yourself the interaction set forth tonight, you will find this to be true. While sometimes you may exaggerate a hurt, at other times you do not allow yourself to know that it happened at all, because it may not fit the picture you have of the situation. It may spoil your self-constructed idea, or it may not correspond to your desire at the time. If the situation seems otherwise favorable and fits into your preconceived idea, you leave out all the jars you leave out all that jars you, allowing it to fester underneath and create unconscious hostility. This entire reaction inhibits your intuitive faculties, at least in this particular respect. The constant provocation that goes on among human beings, while it is hidden from your awareness now, is a reality you will come to perceive very clearly. This will have a very liberating effect on you and your surroundings, but you cannot perceive it unless you understand the patterns in yourself, which I discussed tonight. Let's see how we're doing. We got many more of these. Quite a few. Not too many. I think you good to keep going?
Yeah.
Is it possible in some way to make a truce for even 2 or 3 minutes between one's subconscious and the subconscious of the other person? Sometimes you see the reality intellectually, but by the time you order your subconscious to do something, it is already in revolt and has made the other person unhappy, and then you are unhappy too. It might all have been avoided if there had been a few minutes of truce. Answer: you see, my dear, in the first place, it is not a question of ordering your subconscious. You cannot order it. That is impossible. As long as you attempt such commands, it will be very resistant. Or it may deceive you so that you deceive yourself. The subconscious can only be re-educated by the slow and gradual process pursued in your work. You must actually, most important is that you become fully aware of what you really feel. Actually, you are only half aware of it most of the time and resort to superimposing another set of feelings upon your real reactions. These may be other negative emotions. If they are positive, you will be deceiving yourself even more. Only by stripping away all of these superimpositions can you understand the reason why your subconscious is often so stubborn. If it continues to resist your good efforts, there must be something present that you have not understood and not connected with. Then it is a question of finding the block that causes this particular obstruction. When this happens, you will not need a short truce. You will have real peace with yourself and therefore with others. While you may command a truce in your outer actions, in your words, and even in your thoughts, the subconscious does not respond to such discipline. Truce, as you see it, cannot really work. It is as unreal as the effect of attempting to command it would be. Question: suppose we are able to put our own house in order. Will we then eliminate provocations in the other person? Answer: you do not even have to put your house in order to that extent that you are fully mature and more or less perfect. This perfection hardly ever exists in the human sphere, but the awareness of your immaturity, a real insight into an understanding of your reactions and feelings that cause provocation, will weaken the habit of provocation sufficiently until you finally will cease bringing on provocation and will in turn not be provoked by others. As you gain a certain detachment from yourself in a healthy way, the smoldering, unhealthy drive and force will be taken out of your emotional reactions. In fact, I would even say that this is the only kind of valid truce that can be accomplished. Allow yourself to see what you really feel and why. And when you have an overall view, without any further subterfuge and It's a deception. Such knowledge will no longer disquiet you. It will have a calming effect. You will have made peace with yourself by accepting your still existing imperfections, and will no longer harrow yourself trying for a perfection that you cannot possibly attain at the moment. Once you accept the reality of your imperfect self, the resulting hurts will no longer be so serious and tragic. You will then accept them as a consequence of your accepted imperfections, which you can now observe calmly while gaining more understanding about them, and thus nearing perfection and maturity. In this way, your hostility will vanish, your provocations will too. Relapses will surely occur, but you will accept them with a realistic outlook. You will gain further insight from them, knowing that they are possible because something has not penetrated deeply enough and has to be found anew so as to be assimilated on deeper levels of your being. Hostility exists in you because you are unaware that you are hurt and why you are hurt. Just think of times when you are really aware of a hurt without anger and without feeling hostile. You may feel sad, but feeling sad seems to many people so humiliating that they prefer to be angry and therefore hostile. That is a particular kind of childishness existing in everyone. You think it is superior to be angry and hostile than to be sad, so you suppress the real hurt. But the hostility has to be hidden too, because it makes you feel guilty for other reasons. So it comes out in a devious, hidden way, which in turn brings on further provocation. Provocation is a result of unconsciousness and suppressed hostility, and hostility results from unconscious and suppressed hurt. So at the bottom, it's getting down to that simple pain of not being loved. Go your way, my dearest ones, and may the blessings we bring to all of you envelop and penetrate your body, soul, and spirit, so that you open up your soul and become your real self, your own real self. Be blessed, my friends, be in peace, and be in God. Okay.
Yeah,
See, stop the share and
this was great. Thank you so much, Darlene.
yeah. Let me stop the recording for a minute and just